For over 2 weeks, I had been lying in a hospital bed at Meadowbrook Medical Center in rural Oregon, watching the seasons change through a window I could barely open. At 72, with a body more brittle than brave, I thought the hardest part of getting old would be the physical pain. But I was wrong. It was the loneliness that cut deeper. My daughter, Charlotte, and her husband, Matthew, hadn't called, texted, or even asked the nurse how I was doing. They lived just 3 hours away, but acted like I was on another planet. Always too busy, always back-to-back meetings. But the person who showed up every single day was my late son's widow, Amelia. She'd drive from 2 towns over after finishing her nursing shift, holding my hand through the nights, bringing me chamomile tea, and adjusting my blankets just right. She never once made me feel like a burden. It wasn't lost on me. One night, staring at the pale green ceiling tiles and thinking about everything I'd given and everything I'd lost, I made a decision. If I didn't make things clear now, I might never get the chance. It was a stormy Wednesday evening when it hit. I'd just managed to warm up a bowl of leftover lentil stew when a sudden excruciating pain stabbed through my lower right abdomen. It felt like someone was twisting a blade inside me. Slow, cruel, deliberate. I gasped, clutching the kitchen counter, my fingers gripping the edge so hard my knuckles turned white. My late husband, Harold, had passed away 8 years ago. My only son, Aaron, had been gone for nearly 5. And though Amelia, his widow, and little Sophie, my granddaughter, still lived in the same house with me, they were both out that night. Amelia had a late shift, and Sophie was with her best friend for a school project. I was alone, just as I had feared. As the pain intensified, I stumbled toward the living room, heart racing, cold sweat soaking my clothes. My trembling hands couldn't unlock the phone on the first 3 tries. I kept whispering to myself, "Don't fall. Please don't fall." Somehow I managed to dial 911. The siren echoed down our quiet street minutes later. The lights flashed red against the walls as the paramedics loaded me into the ambulance. My vision blurred, the sterile, white ceiling above me spinning into a distant fog. At the hospital, everything moved fast. Acute appendicitis, emergency surgery. The doctor's voice was calm but urgent. "We need a family member's consent, ma'am," he said through his mask, "and someone to stay post-op." My heart clenched. I thought of Charlotte. She was my firstborn, the child I raised through heartbreak, through poverty, through those long winter nights in our tiny apartment. I had taught her to ride a bike, packed her lunches, stayed up to help with algebra. I gave her everything I had and then some. With trembling fingers, I called her. When she answered, her voice was clipped, distracted. "Mom? I'm in the middle of something. Can we talk later?" "Charlotte," I said, trying to steady my voice, "I'm at the hospital. It's serious. I need surgery. I need your signature." There was a pause. I could hear her keyboard in the background. "Appendicitis, wow. Now's just really bad timing, Mom. I've got 3 back-to-back calls and Matt's out of town. Can't they just go ahead with it? I'll wire any costs." I swallowed hard. This wasn't just about money. It was about presence. But she had none to give. I said okay and hung up. My eyes burned. I stared at the monitor beside me, its steady beeping a cruel reminder. You're alone. Then, like a light flickering through the dark, Amelia's name surfaced in my mind. Without much hope, I called her. The phone rang only once. "Mrs. Green?" Her voice was filled with alarm. "Are you all right?" I broke down, explaining everything between short breaths. She didn't hesitate. "I'm coming. Right now. Text me the hospital name." That moment, the instant, unquestioning decision, changed everything. Less than 40 minutes later, the ER doors burst open and Amelia rushed in, breathless, her hair slightly damp from the Oregon drizzle. She looked around wildly until her eyes found mine, curled on the hospital bed, pale, tubes snaking from my arm. Her face broke. Without hesitation, she hurried to my side. "Mrs. Green, are you okay? Are you in pain?" Her voice trembled, eyes glossy with concern. Before I could even speak, she turned to the doctor and said, "I'm her medical proxy. What needs to be done?" The staff barely had time to react. She was already reviewing forms, asking the right questions, and signing consent papers with quick, confident strokes. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't waver. She wasn't just present. She was unwavering, like a soldier stepping into the gap without waiting for instructions. I watched through tears that blurred my vision. I had never seen someone move with such quiet strength, especially for someone who wasn't even technically family. But Amelia didn't need a title to act like one. Right before they wheeled me into the OR, she leaned down, her hand warm around mine. "Don't be afraid," she whispered. "I'm here, I won't leave." As the anesthesia crawled into my veins and the world went soft and far away, her voice was the last sound I heard. The surgery went smoothly. When I woke up, the sky outside the window was dark, the kind of inky blue that comes just before dawn. A single lamp cast a halo of light across the room. And there, slumped in the visitor chair, was Amelia, still wearing her work scrubs, her jacket draped over her shoulders, her hands still curled around mine. She hadn't gone home, not once. My throat was dry. I shifted slightly, rustling the blanket. She stirred awake immediately. "You're up," she said gently, eyes wide with relief. "How do you feel? Should I get the nurse?" I tried to speak, but all I could manage was a whisper. Without a word, she poured a bit of warm water from her thermos into a cap, dipped a cotton swab, and gently touched it to my lips. "They said you can't drink yet, but I thought you'd be thirsty," she said, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. I looked at her, really looked, and something inside me cracked, a kind of grief, but also a strange, raw peace. "You shouldn't have to do all this," I whispered. She smiled, tired but true. "I'm not doing it because I have to. I'm doing it because you matter." It hit me harder than any painkillers could numb. Charlotte had my blood, but Amelia had my heart. In the days that followed my surgery, recovery was slow but steady. Nurses came and went, adjusting IV lines and checking vitals. But the only constant was Amelia. She never made a show of her presence. She just was, quietly fluffing my pillows, reheating homemade broth, reading the dosage labels twice. She didn't hover. She didn't chatter. She simply stayed. It was in that silence, those in-between moments, that the shift happened in me. I used to believe family meant blood, history, obligation. Charlotte was my daughter. I had raised her through hardship, believed in her potential, given her everything. I thought that bond was unbreakable, that one day it would be enough to call her back when I needed her most. But she hadn't come. Not when the pain hit, not during surgery, not when I lay there, unsure if I'd wake up. She called once, brief, rushed, impatient. "I'm swamped, Mom. I'll check in when I can." And I waited until I realized she wasn't coming, not because she didn't care, but because caring required something she no longer knew how to give: time. Meanwhile, Amelia, who had every reason to walk away, showed up again and again, without being asked, without expectation. She didn't carry our name by blood, but she carried something else far heavier: responsibility, and she carried it with grace. One morning, a nurse wheeled me into the hospital garden. The light filtered through branches above us, casting dappled shadows on the brick path. I watched Amelia walking just ahead, her hand resting gently on my granddaughter Sophie's shoulder. They were laughing at something. Sophie's stuffed bunny tucked under one arm, Amelia holding her lunchbox. That small scene gripped me harder than any legal contract ever could. This was my family, not because a birth certificate said so, but because they stayed. That evening, Charlotte finally came, her first real visit since the surgery. She swept into the room wearing a sleek camel-colored coat, holding a designer fruit basket as if it were a trophy. "Mom, how are you?" she asked without waiting for the answer. Her eyes scanned the room. Not me. She had a Zoom call in an hour. Her words were polished, practiced, efficient, the kind of care that performed well in public. I responded gently, "I'm doing better." But in my heart, I knew better. She wasn't really here. She was just making an appearance. As she left, her perfume lingered longer than she did. Later that night, Amelia sat beside my bed, mending a button on Sophie's sweater. No words, no fanfare, just presence. That's when it truly sank in. I had spent years pouring into one child, believing she'd pour it back. But life had rewritten the equation, and in the new math of love and loyalty, Amelia equaled more. The decision didn't come in a flash. It settled over me like the slow drifting of morning fog, quiet, inevitable. That weekend, I sat at the small desk in my bedroom, fingers hovering over an old envelope marked estate planning. For years, I had avoided making changes to my will, out of fear, out of guilt, out of a stubborn, lingering hope that Charlotte would come back to me, not just physically, but emotionally. But she never did. After my discharge, Amelia brought me home. She helped me up the porch steps, fluffed the couch pillows, and tucked a soft blanket over my knees. Sophie skipped around us, holding a get well card she had made with construction paper and glitter. "Grandma," she said, holding it up proudly, "I drew our house, all of us inside." I blinked back tears. It wasn't the structure that mattered, it was the feeling, the warmth, the safety, and they had created it. That night, after everyone was asleep, I pulled out the trust draft I'd started but never signed. I made the final changes. I didn't do it in anger, I did it in clarity. I listed Amelia and Sophie as primary beneficiaries of the house, not because I wanted to exclude Charlotte, but because I could no longer pretend she would ever need this home the way they did, or care for it the way they already had. The next morning, I called Janet, my longtime friend and retired estate lawyer. "I'm ready," I told her. "Let's finalize the trust." There was a pause on the line, then a quiet chuckle. "You've finally made peace with your heart, huh?" "Yes," I said, "and it's about time." That afternoon, I signed the paperwork in Janet's sunlit office. No fanfare, no drama, just a simple pen on paper that echoed years of emotion in a few firm strokes. I didn't tell Amelia that day. She didn't ask for anything, and that's why she deserved everything. But word travels. By the next evening, Charlotte was on my doorstep, not with flowers, not with a meal, but with a folder full of printed documents and a fire in her voice. "Mom," she snapped, "I heard what you did. You're putting the house into a trust." "With her?" She didn't say Amelia's name, just her, like she was a stranger squatting in our lives. I didn't argue. I didn't defend. I simply said, Yes, because she's the one who's been here. Charlotte's lips curled into a tight, professional smile. Then I'll have no choice but to request a competency evaluation. If you're thinking emotionally, I raised a hand. Calm, steady. Charlotte, I may be emotional, but I am also very, very clear. Behind me, Amelia had stepped into the hallway, holding Sophie's backpack. Her eyes met mine, wide, uncertain. It's okay, I told her. I've made my decision. Because love isn't just a feeling, it's in action. And Amelia had shown up time and again. For weeks, things remained tense. Charlotte stopped calling. She didn't answer texts. The silence was sharp, almost theatrical, like she was waiting for me to regret the decision. But I didn't. Amelia continued her quiet rhythm, making soup, checking my blood pressure, helping Sophie with homework, folding laundry without being asked. Not once did she mention the trust. Not once did she even imply she deserved it. Her presence was the opposite of Charlotte's absence. Constant, comforting, unspoken. And then slowly, something began to shift. It started with a phone call on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Charlotte's name lit up my screen. I stared at it for a long time before picking up. "Hi, Mom," she said. Her voice was different, softer. I know I've been distant. I wasn't expecting everything to hit me so hard." There was a pause. I guess I thought I had more time. I didn't respond right away, because sometimes silence says what words can't. A week later, she stopped by unannounced. No agenda, no folder, just a scarf loosely wrapped around her neck and 2 cups of coffee from the old corner cafe we used to visit when she was in college. We sat on the porch. The breeze was gentle. Sophie played with chalk in the driveway, drawing hearts and suns and stars. "I watched Dad fade," Charlotte finally said, eyes distant. "And I told myself I'd never be that kind of daughter, the one who disappears." "But you did," I said softly. "I know," she whispered. She didn't make excuses this time. Didn't blame work or Matthew or stress. She just admitted it. And in that quiet honesty, something cracked open. The next Sunday, she returned again, this time with a bag of groceries and a bottle of Amelia's favorite chamomile tea. They stood awkwardly in the kitchen at first, like 2 actors unsure of their lines. Then Sophie burst in, waving a picture she drew of the 3 of us, all holding hands in front of our house. "Look," she beamed, "I made us a family again." Amelia smiled. Charlotte's eyes welled up, and for the first time in years, they both laughed at the same time. Awkward, a little forced, but real. After that day, Charlotte came by more often. She didn't become perfect. She didn't suddenly transform into the daughter I'd always hoped she'd be. But she tried, and trying, I've learned, is its own kind of love. One afternoon, I found her and Amelia sitting at the kitchen table, planning Sophie's birthday, not competing, not comparing. Just 2 women with shared love for the same little girl, and maybe in their own way, for me too. Watching them, something in my chest softened. This was what growth looked like. Not grand gestures, not apologies shouted in the rain. Just the quiet return of someone who finally realized that presence is a gift. And family is built, day by day, in the moments we choose to show up. Spring arrived early that year in Meadowbrook. The cherry blossoms bloomed brighter than I remembered, the kind of pink that made you believe life still held surprises. The backyard, once quiet and overgrown, now hummed with laughter every Sunday. Amelia's roast chicken roasted in the oven like clockwork. Sophie dashed around the patio in rainbow socks. And Charlotte, yes, even Charlotte, had begun arriving early to help slice fruit, cracking jokes with Amelia as they folded napkins or argued over whether carrot cake was a dessert or a punishment. And me? I sat in my old wicker chair beneath the blooming dogwood tree, a light quilt across my legs, a mug of lemon tea in hand. I watched them, these women who had once stood on opposite ends of a fault line, now sharing the same rhythm. One Sunday, as Amelia stirred the pot in the stove, Charlotte leaned against the counter beside her. "I don't say this often," she began awkwardly, "but thank you for taking care of her, of everything." Amelia looked over, eyes soft but steady. "I didn't do it alone," she replied. And it was true. Healing had happened here, not in one big moment, but in hundreds of tiny ones. A shared laugh over spilled soup, Sophie curling up on Charlotte's lap, Amelia texting Charlotte to pick up eggs without needing to explain why. That afternoon, we all gathered under the oak tree for Sophie's birthday. The banner read "Ate and Great" in glittery letters, and the cake was a rainbow swirl. Sophie's special request. When it came time for photos, Sophie stood between the three of us, arms outstretched, pulling us in like the sun drawing petals open. The camera flashed, and in that instant, frozen forever in pixels, we weren't just a grandmother, a daughter, and a daughter-in-law. We were a family. That night, after everyone left and the house had settled into its soft hum of evening, Charlotte sat beside me on the couch. She didn't say anything for a long time, just held my hand. "You know," she said finally, "I used to think love was something that just existed, like a switch you flip on once and it's always there." She looked at me. "But I've learned that love is work. Real love is showing up, even when you're tired, even when you've been gone too long." I squeezed her hand. It's never too late to start showing up. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves, and for the first time in years, I felt a peace that ran deeper than silence. Not because everything was perfect, but because it was real. Because love had finally come home. Not as a birthright, but as a choice. And that choice had made all the difference. Through decades of raising children, losing loved ones, and navigating the heavy silences of old age, I used to believe that blood would always guarantee connection, that the children I poured myself into would naturally pour something back. But life has its own way of clarifying the truth. Real love isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself in grand gestures or elaborate apologies. It shows up quietly, in the meals reheated after midnight, the hospital visits no one else remembered, the way someone wraps a blanket around your knees without needing to be asked. I learned that family is not a given. It's built, nurtured, and chosen, over and over again. And sometimes, the ones who stand beside you in your darkest hour aren't the ones you raised. They're the ones who simply refuse to let you fall. We often expect love to come from those closest to us by blood, but in reality, life teaches us that presence beats proximity. If you're waiting for someone to show they care, look not at what they say, but what they do. And if you're the one standing by, showing up without recognition, know this: your presence matters, deeply, quietly, unforgettably. The next time you find yourself questioning who belongs in your life, ask, who shows up when it's hard? The answer will tell you everything. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like and share with your friends. Your support keeps these stories alive. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new episode. And if today's story touched your heart, leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Take care, stay well, and see you in the next story.